Single dad was enjoying tea alone, until an old woman asked him to pretend he was her daughter's fiancé. Daniel was a simple man. He did not ask for much from life. A warm cup of tea, a quiet corner, and maybe 30 pages of a good book. That was enough for him. That was his version of a perfect afternoon. He was 38 years old, a single father, and every minute of his day belonged to someone or something else. School runs, packed lunches, bedtime stories, parent-teacher meetings, grocery lists written on the back of old receipts. His life was full, genuinely full, but it was also exhausting in the way that only parents understand. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that settles into your bones and just lives there. His daughter Lily was 7. She had her mother's eyes and her father's habit of going quiet when something was bothering her. Daniel loved her more than he had words for, but loving someone completely does not mean you never need 5 minutes to yourself. Any parent who says otherwise is either lying or has not slept in weeks. So every Tuesday, when Lily went to her art class 2 streets away, Daniel walked to a small cafe on the corner of the road and ordered Earl Grey tea with no sugar. He always sat at the same corner table, the one near the window but not directly in front of it, where the light came in soft and the noise from outside stayed outside. He would open his book, take his first sip, and for exactly 90 minutes, he was just a man drinking tea. Not a father, not a widower, just a person, sitting quietly, existing without a to-do list. That Tuesday in November, he was 4 pages into his book when someone pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. He looked up. She was a small woman, somewhere in her late 70s, with silver hair pinned neatly under a pale blue hat. She wore pearl earrings, a pressed gray coat, and she carried herself with the kind of posture you only see in women who grew up being told to sit up straight and actually listened. She placed her handbag on the table between them, not asking, not hesitating, and looked at him as if they had arranged to meet there. "I'm Margaret," she said. Daniel stared at her for a moment. Daniel said, "Because what else do you say?" Now, most people in that situation would feel annoyed. A stranger sitting at your table without permission, interrupting your only quiet hour of the week, that is not exactly welcome. But Daniel was the kind of person who found it very hard to be rude, even when rudeness was probably the reasonable response. He closed his book, he set it down, he waited. Margaret did not waste time. She explained herself with the calm, unhurried confidence of a woman who had stopped being embarrassed about things sometime around her 60th birthday. She had a daughter, she said, Caroline, 41 years old, lived on the other side of the city, called every single day, and had spent the last 2 years treating her mother like she was made of tissue paper. Every conversation turned into a gentle suggestion. Maybe Margaret should think about moving somewhere smaller, somewhere with more support, somewhere with people around. What Margaret heard underneath all of those gentle suggestions was, "You are getting old, and I am scared, and I need you to be somewhere I can picture you being safe." She understood it, she really did. Caroline meant well, but there is a difference between being loved and being managed, and Margaret had started to feel like she was slowly being managed out of her own life. So the previous week, on the phone, she had mentioned something, casually, almost as an accident. She had told Caroline that she had met someone, a man, someone nice, someone kind, someone she had been spending a little time with. His name was James. He liked tea and books. Caroline had gone very quiet on the phone. Then she had said she would love to meet him, and Margaret, having said the thing, had to now do the thing. She was meeting Caroline in this cafe in about 8 minutes. Daniel looked at his cup of tea. He looked at his book. He looked at the small, composed woman sitting across from him, who had just asked him, without a single trace of embarrassment, to pretend to be her fictional boyfriend for the next hour. His first instinct was to laugh. Not in a mean way, just in the way you laugh when something is so unexpected that your brain does not know what else to do with it. His second instinct was to say no. Politely, kindly, but no. He had enough going on. He did not need to walk into a stranger's family situation and start pretending to be someone he was not. But then Margaret said something that he was not expecting. She said that she knew it sounded silly. She knew it was a lot to ask. But the thing was, she was not doing this to deceive her daughter. She was doing this because she needed Caroline to see her differently, even if just for one afternoon. She needed her daughter to remember that she was still a person, not a problem to be solved, not a worry to be managed, A person, with a life, with a Wednesday morning, with things she still enjoyed, and people she still wanted to meet. She said it quietly, without any drama, looking at him with very clear eyes. Daniel was quiet for a moment. He knew that feeling. He knew it from the other side of it. After his wife passed away, 3 years ago, the people who loved him had looked at him in a certain way, that mixture of love and sadness and worry, that means well but feels, after a while, like being wrapped too tightly. People stopped asking him what he thought about things, and started asking how he was coping. There is a difference. A big one. He picked up his teacup. He took a sip. He said, "What does James do for a living?" The corner of Margaret's mouth moved, just slightly. "He works in publishing," she said. "He is quiet, he is kind, and he does not talk too much." "Perfect," Daniel said. "That is exactly me." Caroline arrived 4 minutes later. She was tall, still in her work coat, with the look of someone who had rushed across the city and was trying not to show it. She scanned the cafe the way people do when they are braced for disappointment, and then she saw her mother, sitting upright, hat on, perfectly composed, across from a man who stood up when she approached, and shook her hand, and smiled like he had all the time in the world. Daniel had spent enough time around nervous people to know how to seem calm. He was warm, without being too eager. He answered questions with just enough detail to sound real, and not enough to get caught. He let Margaret lead, because Margaret, it turned out, was extraordinary under pressure. She was funny and sharp and completely at ease, and watching her talk to her daughter, Daniel could see clearly what the problem was. Caroline was so busy looking for signs of frailty that she kept missing all the signs of life. The 45 minutes passed more quickly than Daniel expected. He heard about Caroline's job. He heard about Margaret's garden, which apparently still had tomatoes growing in November, because she had built a small greenhouse structure out of old window frames 3 summers ago. He laughed at the right moments. He topped up Margaret's tea. He said very little about himself, and steered the conversation back to them whenever he felt it drifting toward territory where his story might fall apart. It was almost going perfectly. Then Caroline asked how they had met. "Through a friend," Margaret said. "In a bookshop," Daniel said. At exactly the same time. A silence landed on the table. Not a long one, maybe 2 seconds. But 2 seconds is a very long time when you are pretending to be someone's boyfriend. Caroline looked between them. Margaret did not blink. She did not shift in her seat. She said, "A friend recommended the bookshop. I went in looking for a gift, and Daniel was asking the staff about the same author I was looking for." She smiled at her daughter. "Funny how things happen." Daniel nodded slowly. He looked at his tea. Under the table, Margaret's hand briefly tapped his knee. Not a romantic gesture, just a small signal that passed between 2 people running the same quiet operation, and he understood it to mean, "Stay calm, we are fine. Do not elaborate." He did not elaborate. When Caroline excused herself to go to the restroom, Margaret turned to Daniel, just for a moment. The performance dropped, not completely, but enough that he could see the real version of her, the one that was a little tired, and a little relieved, and more grateful than she wanted to show. She thanked him. Simply, without making too much of it. He told her she had not needed him, that anyone in that cafe who had watched her that afternoon could see she was doing absolutely fine, that Caroline just needed reminding of what was already there. Margaret looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "You are a good man. I am sorry I ruined your book." He told her the book would still be there next Tuesday. When Caroline came back, they said their goodbyes warmly and naturally. Caroline hugged her mother for a moment longer than a quick goodbye hug. Daniel noticed that. He noticed how Margaret stood very still in that hug, and let it happen. He picked Lily up from her art class with 4 minutes to spare. She came out of the door holding a painting, a house with a lopsided roof, a sun in the corner, 2 stick figures with circle heads holding hands. "Who is that?" he asked, pointing at the figures. She looked at him like it was obvious. "Us," she said. He drove home quietly. He thought about Margaret and the way she had said that she just needed her daughter to see her as a person, not a problem. He thought about Caroline, who was probably driving home on the other side of the city feeling lighter than she had in months, without fully understanding why. He thought about his wife. He thought about Lily and the painting on the back seat. He thought about all the ways people love each other clumsily, hovering too close, worrying too loudly, inventing fictional men in cafes, just to hold on to a version of themselves that the people they love have started to forget. It was a strange afternoon, but it was also, quietly, one of the better ones he had had in a long time. 3 weeks later, he sat down at his corner table, ordered his Earl Grey, and opened his book. The staff member brought his tea, and also handed him a small envelope. She said a woman had left it a few days ago for the man who always sat in the corner drinking tea alone. Inside was a card, handwritten. Neat, careful letters, unhurried. The handwriting of someone who had never switched to typing everything. It said, "Caroline called last night, just to chat, not to check up on me. First time in 2 years, thank you for the loan of an afternoon." It was signed simply, Margaret. Daniel sat with that for a while. Then he put the card inside his book. At the page where he had stopped reading the afternoon, a stranger sat down across from him without asking. He used it as a bookmark for a long time after that. Plaque. Plaque.